Good morning. To redistricting. So thank you. I forgot about that. All these buttons you have to push. Thank you. So again, the primary purpose of the meeting and the only item on the agenda today is the redistricting discussion relative to the proposed maps based upon the 2020 census completion. So with that, we are going to start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Supervisor Parlin, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Everybody please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you for that. And we will move to adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any proposed changes to the agenda?
Nope. Nope.
I'll accept a motion for adoption.
So
and
moved. Second. Go.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that takes us to our 9 a.m. time allocation at 9:03 a.m. So we got within 3 minutes. We're doing pretty good. So with that, Kim, would you please read item number 1 and any related items relative to public comment?
Item number 1 is a hearing. Eldorado County Surveyor, Register of Voters, County Council, and the Chief Administrative Office providing a public workshop on the 2021 redistricting process, redistricting public hearing number 4.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Jennifer
Mr. Chairman, would you
Fanich.
mind opening the hearing, please?
Oh, yes. So I hereby open the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Make it official.
Jennifer Fanich, Chief Administrative Office. Today is the 4th public meeting on the 2021 redistricting process. And here's a little bit about what we're going to go over today. First, we'll go over what redistricting is and the process. We'll go over the rules for map alternatives and our timeline. And then the surveyor's office will present 3 new map alternatives. And we'll take public comment and have a discussion about those alternatives.
Let me add one thing at this point that Supervisor Turnbull and I have discussed a 4th map alternative, which I know thanks to the surveyor's office has been prepared. So I'm not sure what would be the appropriate time to introduce that. It has been distributed a little bit by various people. So I just want to mention there is a 4th map. And so the only question is when would be the appropriate time to make that announcement and make it available.
I'll defer to council on that. We've posted 3 maps, so we don't have the 4th one posted for the rest of the public, but we could bring it up on the screen.
Yeah, I would suggest let's go through the staff presentation, including the 3 maps that were prepared at the direction of the board from the prior meeting. And similar to what we did at the last hearing, if there are additional maps that the supervisors had wanted to present at that point, we could do that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
But I'd like to point out that all the maps we talked about last time had been posted for everyone to see. All 9 of them have been posted prior to the meeting and available prior to the meeting. So I think it's very concerning that there's been a map out there circulating that was not posted for the public nor the supervisors, yet we were receiving public comment on it. I find that very concerning. So I'm not sure where we're going to go with that, but I want to make it known I have huge concerns about the way this was presented.
I share your concerns, the fact that other people have seen this and we haven't had a chance to digest it or weigh in on it and receive comments on it. I share your concerns.
Yep. So we will get to the discussion on that, the fourth map, when we get through the first three reviews, and we'll give you a little bit more information on how that all came about. So not to say that there'll be adequate time for everybody to review it, but I do anticipate, obviously, we know there's going to be another Board of Supervisors agendized item, but I think we may end up with one more public hearing based upon the request to make modifications to either the three new maps or to consider the fourth map in more detail. So I think we just need to see how this progresses, see where we end up as a board, and then make the appropriate determination at that point as to what the next step is. So,
Well, and to follow up with that, you just said, to see where the board goes. We already went in a direction at the last board meeting.
Right.
We had very clear direction. So this fourth map doesn't follow any of that as far as I can tell. So I just want to be clear, when we have these conversations as a board and we work through all these really big items, and then to get blindsided like this, I don't think it does anyone a service. It does actually, I think, a huge disservice to the board, to the process, to transparency, to the public.
we can get it. What the process was an attempt to make a map. We're getting way ahead of where I think we should be.
Well,
I'll
I
explain
wanna
the whole
make it
process
clear
where we
that-
failed
that
to be able to execute.
You just
a new
mentioned
map.
board direction, and I think that it's been violated.
Okay.
The only concerns I had about the other two maps, which was 2 revised and 3, it puts me almost out of my district. In fact, it does put me out of my district in one of them.
So we're going to get into that after this.
And that was one of the biggest concerns that I had, and that was one of the reasons why I talked about this fourth map. So
we will get to that part of the discussion. I don't want to circumvent all of the
All right.
planned discussion before we get to the fourth map, but there will be a lot of dialogue on the fourth map, I can guarantee you. So there was a process issue that happened that we'll explain.
Okay.
Jennifer, back to you.
Okay.
Morning, morning, morning. Here we
Good
are.
morning, you're good. I'm going to go over the redistricting process really quickly. We've done this at each meeting, but for anybody who's joining us for the first time today, I just want to go over kind of our process and what the parameters are that we have to adhere to when preparing a new map. So the US Constitution requires a count every 10 years of everyone residing in the US. And at the conclusion of that census process, the county must conduct our own process to analyze population data and redraw district boundaries to ensure that each district is substantially equal in population. In El Dorado County, this process is conducted for the Board of Supervisors districts, those that represent you locally. Our process does not determine districts for the California Assembly or US congressional districts. So this is just pertaining to our local boundary lines. There are several factors that the law says we at the county must consider when drawing a new map, and that's required again by the Constitution, in compliance with the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and as part of the 2019 Fair and Inclusive Redistricting for Municipalities and Political Subdivisions, or Fair Maps Act. Okay. So mapping factors in order of priority. In addition to achieving as equal population as possible, we have to prioritize geographic contiguity. So areas that meet only at the points of adjoining corners are not contiguous, and areas that are separated by water but not connected by a bridge, tunnel, or ferry service are also not contiguous. Next, to the extent practicable, the geographic integrity of any local neighborhood or local community of interest shall be respected in a manner that minimizes its division. And we focused on communities of interest the first 2 meetings before we had the census data. So a community of interest is a population that shares common interests and should be included within a single supervisorial district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. So you'll see those communities of interest that were outlined by members of the public and by the redistricting team included on the maps. And we tried to keep all of those communities of interest together, but as you'll see later, when you draw lines, it's impossible to keep every single community of interest together. So that's where the decision-making comes in. The law says a community of interest does not include a relationship with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. The third criteria is to minimize the division of a city or census designated place. So the maps attempt to do that as well. The fourth is that supervisorial district boundaries should be easily identifiable and understandable by residents and shall be bounded by natural and artificial barriers like streets, like rivers, etc. And last, where it does not conflict with the preceding criteria in this subdivision, supervisorial districts shall be drawn to encourage geographical compactness in a manner that nearby areas of population are not bypassed in favor of more distant populations. So you can see that squiggly shape up there, that is not a compact district there. And so we try to avoid that. So these are mandatory criteria, whereas prior to the Fair Maps Act, they were criteria that we were permitted to use. We now have to consider these all in order of priority. And again, as I said, there's no map that will meet all of these criteria perfectly. And there's countless maps that could be created that meet the intent of these mapping factors. Other rules, as I went over just now, we have to comply with the Constitution, the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. We cannot draw a map for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against a political party. And then we can consider other criteria as long as they don't conflict or outweigh these criteria that we've listed. So here's our process timeline. I've showed this slide each time as well. You can see up in the first arrow, we had two workshops on June 4th and August 4th, and those focused only on community of interest input. So we asked the public, how do you define your community? How would you draw the lines for your community? And that was in order to get that really important information in, and also we wanted to have it in advance of creating any maps. So as we kind of knew would happen, we received some input on that, but we're receiving a lot more input now that we have some maps drawn on that community of interest input. So August 19th, the census data was delivered to the county, and we were able to get that into our GIS mapping systems and create maps for the October 14th workshop. We had 9 maps in total because members of the public were able to submit their own maps that GIS for the most part helped create. So those were all considered by the board, and map number 1, which was the city-based map alternative, was the one that the board liked the best, but it needed some work. It needed some changes. And what we heard at that meeting was specifically that certain communities needed to stay intact, and those included Serrano, Cameron Park, the Carson Creek specific plan area, and the area that we call the Divide. So GIS has created 3 new maps. There's 2 alternatives that are based off of that map number 1 city redistricting alternative. And those are attached to the item and on the wall in the boardroom. And then there was also an intent, a request to see a map that kept the community of Pollock Pines whole and in one of the West Slope districts, so within a district other than District 5. So now I'm going to turn it over to the surveyor's office and the GIS team, and they will walk us through those map alternatives.
Jennifer, you're up.
Yep, I am sharing my screen. All right. Okay, good morning. I'm Jennifer Carlton, Surveyor GIS Department, and I will be going over the descriptions of the three redistricting alternatives for today, starting with the first revision of the city-based alternative. This alternative used the city-based alternative as a starting point as requested by the board per the October 14th, 2021 public redistricting meeting. It adjusts the district boundaries to prevent major communities that were identified in the last meeting from being split between two or more districts. As Jennifer mentioned, these included Cameron Park as defined by the Cameron Park CSD, the Serrano Eldorado specific plan, Pollock Pines as defined by the census designated place, the Carson Creek specific plan, and the divide defined as the large land area, including the communities of Kelsey and Garden Valley to the south, Cool to the west, the Placer Eldorado County line to the north, and Silver Slab Creek to the east. In this alternative, District 1 fully encompasses Serrano, Carson Creek, and all specific plans. District 2 includes Cameron Park and a majority of the South County. District 3 contains Placerville, Eldorado Diamond Springs, and the Camino and Mosquito communities. District 4 includes Shingle Springs, Rescue, the Divide, and the majority of the North County. District 5 combines the community of Pollock Pines with South Lake Tahoe and the Tahoe Basin. CSDs, census designated places, specific plans, rural centers, and the cities were also utilized to prevent as many communities of interest as possible from being split. All right, the second alternative.
Can we ask questions about the first alternative map? Is it appropriate? Because I do have one. I've received any number of emails from the Bass Lake community that they do not want to see their community split in half. And I'm wondering if this would revise #1 map, if that community could be added back into District 1, if that would take it out of the context of being able to balance everything. I understand there's less than 1,000 homes out there. You'd estimate something like 2,000 population, maybe. That would seem to be within the variance that we've talked about. Is that a practical change, tweak, if you will, fine tuning of this revised #1, or will that not work, Jennifer, in your opinion? Because the original city districting alternative included that portion, and then when we did the revised #1, it disappeared in that area.
Are you referring to Bass Lake?
Supervisor Heidel, this is Jose Crummett. We looked at that yesterday, and there are approximately 2,200 residents in that area.
Okay.
The difficulty with making a change right now would be that if there's other changes that are suggested to any of those boundaries, we may not have the population to move back and forth. But it is a change that we are taking under advice, so to speak. Right now, the Bass Lake Village area and Bridlewood Canyon are almost entirely within one district, and on the first revision, that would be in District 4.
Okay, because I'm sure we're going to hear public comment on that we get later, but I just wanted to put that out on the table at this point. I know I've seen a lot of email, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be District 1, but they would prefer not to be split up as a community of interest called the Bass Lake Hill Specific Plan, I guess is the best title for it. So
yeah,
we'll get into that discussion further, but I wanted to make that point. If we could tweak some of these maps a little bit, we might be able to accomplish that objective as well.
I agree. And I was going to ask County Council for clarification again on the differential, because I was a little bit surprised by the 3 maps that were public. Didn't really take advantage of the differential as much as I had hoped. And I think that this area here that you're just referring to, the Bass Lake area, could have been one of those that maybe, could have been the differential lumped into District 1, perhaps, to make that community feel more part of Eldorado Hills, as they've always been. the maps that we got here, and I gotta say, you guys did a great job in my mind of
Yes,
following our direction, by
always.
the way. Given that long conversation, I was really impressed by the maps. But again, I was like, going, oh, we didn't use the differential, and I was a little disappointed. So could you go over it so we really know? Because I have an Excel spreadsheet where I was playing with numbers, but I don't know if I did it right.
Yes, yeah, I can
Can I
jump
say
in.
something first?
Sure.
So Brian Fraser, County Surveyor. So the idea behind what we did here was to keep everything as even as possible,
Right.
knowing that presenting these maps, we're going to have a
Okay.
bunch of tweaks, and that will allow us the best case scenario into moving around to take advantage of the
Perfect.
differential.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that. The advice that I had provided internally is consistent with the advice that I had given during the last hearing, which is our goal should be to have 5 districts with a population that is as equal as we can be in order to comply with the constitutional requirements. Recognizing that, of course, the Supreme Court has sanctioned a maximum population deviation between the largest district and the smallest district of 10%. But really it's not, I guess I want to make sure we're not viewing that as, oh, we can do anything we want so long as it's within that, because even within that, you're really only permitted to deviate from equal population if necessary to accommodate other legitimate redistricting factors.
Right.
So I think the
Exactly.
task that the surveyor's office undertook, consistent with that direction, was to try to accommodate the board's desires and statements from the last meeting, while still keeping as much as possible equal population as between the districts. So I think they felt that they were able to capture the vast majority of what the board had requested while still minimizing the population deviation from district to district. As our surveyor notes, that does provide some opportunity if there are additional changes that need to be made. But for example, the kind of the conceptual map that was proposed previously that would have had for the purpose of keeping a particular area within a district that resulted in a maximum population deviation that was, very close to that 10%
Yes.
threshold, I felt if we could accommodate and accomplish those goals with a map that minimized that deviation, I think that put us in a much better position in the court to comply with our constitutional.
Sure.
mandate.
But if we're trying to fulfill that list, that priority list, and we truly are trying to keep communities together, which is the number one priority, if I remember right.
Yep.
And
It's the second after
it's
contiguity.
It's going to be a challenge for any jurisdiction anywhere in the country to do this without some type of deviation. So, okay, that helps a lot. And I did play with numbers, so I am prepared.
That would be the rationale, that it keeps that community of interest back, and therefore it causes a deviation, but it's based upon the second criteria in the stacking list,
Makes
and that
sense.
seems to override the deviation criteria.
Correct. Yeah, it's again, so long as there are legitimate redistricting factors that are being considered, and that is what is kind of justifying the need to deviate from an equal population from district to district, I think that the map would be defensible.
So I do have a follow-up question. So Jose, oh, good, you're still on the line. So do I understand you correctly that if the board were not to tweak any of the other lines on the city redistricting revised #1 map, that the Bass Lake community could be accommodated in District 1 if we have the deviation, if we play with the deviation?
I am not 100% sure of that. What happens is you have about 2,200 people that are in that area that's in question. It is actually outside of the Bass Lake Hills specific plan and includes Bridlewood Canyon and all of the Bass Lake Village subdivisions. So if you take those 2,200 people and you move them into District 1, say on this map here, you're going to have an assigned population that exceeds the target, but you're also taking them from District 4, so their population is going to be reduced in a like fashion. Is
The
that,
domino
Got
effect,
it.
yes.
Domino
Yeah, so the,
and is that 10% still going to be met after you've done that? And are there any other tweaks that might be necessary on the map? So
Okay.
initially, just by looking at, the number of 2,200, it's probably something that can be accomplished. But
Yes.
there might be other areas on this particular map that are also going to need to be revised for whatever reason. So it's something that we are considering, but of course, we have not done it yet.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Because
All
then
right, thank
District
you.
4 is going to come up short.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
But
Yep.
I think that the Bass Lake Hills could be moved in District 1 theoretically,
Yeah.
so with the numbers. So, yeah.
Okay.
But if I did the math
There it
right, it
is.
comes out as a 6.7% overage for
Yeah.
District 1 if you added the 2,200 in, if that's a nominal number. So we're clearly within the 10%, but it's
Correct.
over 5, so whatever.
Then we got to move District 4 somewhere.
Right.
too,
Then you got to make
so-
some adjustments. I mean,
Right.
like I said, this thing is like a jello mold,
Yeah.
right? You move one little piece of it and it goes
So
somewhere
how many
else.
people are mosquito offhand, Jose?
So Jennifer Fanich, again, I just want to clarify, if we were to say add 5% to one district, then that might take 5% away from the other district, and then there's your 10.
Yeah.
So we have to remember,
Right,
Once
right.
we
Yeah, right.
add,
Compounding
then we're
effects.
subtracting from
Yes.
somewhere else too.
Yes. Good discussion. Okay, I think we're ready to go to map 2 unless anybody else on the board had any other comments for that first revised number 1. Okay, revised number 2, please, Jennifer. Jennifer C, I guess, right?
Yes. All right. The second revision of the city-based alternative maintains all specific plans aside from the Bass Lake specific plan in District 1. District 2 contains the remainder of the Bass Lake specific plan in addition to the entirety of Cameron Park as defined by the Cameron Park CSD and the majority of the South County. District 3 includes Placerville, Diamond Springs, El Dorado, the portion of South County north of Sandridge Road, and Camino. District 4 encompasses Shingle Springs, defined as the Shingle Springs census designated place, Rescue, defined as the rural center, and the Divide as defined in the previous alternative, and much of the North County. Lastly, District 5 contains South Lake Tahoe, the Tahoe Basin, Pollock Pines, and extends down south of Pollock Pines to include more of the Supply Park Hills and Sierra Springs communities as well.
Okay, comments or thoughts on this one from the board, revised number 2?
Well, I don't like it, to be honest with you, especially when if you look at Sand Ridge Road where I live, it basically, if you go the variation, it's going to take me out of my district. So.
That cannot be a consideration.
Right. That
That
is
cannot
not one of
be
the
a
criteria.
consideration on this.
Very clear.
Okay,
Super
I
important.
understand, but
Super important for us to understand that.
didn't you guys put a map together, you and Lori?
I'm just saying we
Yeah, it
cannot
was about Pollock
consider
Yeah. All right,
putting
okay.
ourselves out of districts. We
All right.
cannot configure, be a part of this equation.
All right,
Just-
okay.
So I do have a question on revised number 2. I'm looking again at that Bass Lake area,
Mhm.
and I'm looking at the difference where it appears that an area immediately to the west of Cameron Park, which was in District 1 and the revised number 1 has been taken out from District 2. In the revised number 2, is that the basic changes in District 1? Does it pick up all of the Bass Lake Hills specific plan? And does it remove then a part of what's now included in District 2? I'm trying to recall exactly where that location is without blowing the map up, but can you help me understand that minor change between revised 1 and revised 2?
Can we zoom in on that particular area where the green and the purple come together? Is that doable?
That's about as close as I can get, I think.
Thanks. Maybe that'll help a wee bit.
Yeah. So does this version pick up all of Bass Lake Hills specific plan within District 1? That's the first question. Do we know that?
It does not.
Okay, and it does not because of the area that's shown immediately to the west of Cameron Park, the big green that isn't shown with a lot of
Correct.
houses. Is that the difference?
Correct, yes.
Okay,
That's way smaller than the first map though, huh? The difference?
Yeah.
right. It would appear to be, but okay, so on this one, I guess the same type of logic, if we're going to use the deviation rule, that area could be picked up and it would look a lot like District revised number 1, I guess, revised number 2. If you pick that portion of it up that is adjacent to Cameron Park, the numbers would go up by its equivalent amount. to maybe 6.7% overage or something, but that's the primary shift that occurred between revised 1 and revised 2 for the District 1 boundaries for this version. Is that correct?
Actually, there's another little area we didn't pick up on it, and
Okay.
because nobody sent in comments, but I noticed it. If you go back to the revised number 1,
Yeah,
go up, I don't know how to explain it, but it's that lock area, the lock, what is it called, Wiltshire, or what, you know, that community?
Shire something.
Sterlingshire.
Sterlingshire, that's
There
it.
is, that one.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's her name? That, if you look on that one got bumped in there.
Oh,
You
it's a
see
little
it?
subtlety. Yeah, I do see it
Yeah,
now.
We're on number 2. I'll be honest, on the number 2, I like the District 4 boundary line on number 2 a lot.
Okay.
Just, I can say that. I don't know about the other boundary lines.
I get a difference of 8 on mine, so it doesn't matter. 8 people.
Oh, from one to the other.
And I can understand how in revised 2, the fact that Somerset and Pleasant Valley are not in the South County could be problematic. I understand that because those are light communities. So
Well,
I-
yeah, basically you talk about splitting
Yeah.
up communities, and if you look at map 3, which we're going to get into a little bit in a minute, you're talking about Grizzly Flat, Fairplay, Mount Auckham and stuff that represented District 2 for all these years now are going to be gone.
Right, well,
So-
but
Don't get too excited about map 3. I think that was just for
Yeah, yeah.
giggles,
Yeah.
perhaps.
All right, I'm
Just
just
saying,
saying,
but
what I
those-
have, I'm voicing my opinion is what I'm
On
doing.
Well, but-
map 3, I need a helicopter.
Yeah, it ain't gonna work. But my thing
okay, so
is,
map 3 is out.
the George is on, perhaps on map 2, though, we could move the District 2 boundary north, I guess it is,
To
because.
keep light communities together.
Correct. We have wiggle room. We
Right,
actually have wiggle
right.
room. So we could do that.
Oh, really? Wasn't I
keep-
just told we weren't supposed
You
to
know,
change? it?
I don't think you're listening
Never
to
mind,
us
I'm just
today,
kidding.
really,
I'm just
honestly.
upset. I'm sorry. Can't help it.
Yeah.
It is not about putting
Yeah,
ourselves in
all right,
different
okay.
districts. It is about keeping light communities together. And from that standpoint, I support your perspective that Pleasant Valley and Somerset are light communities to South County and therefore should be considered
Should
as
be
part of
considered
District
part
2.
of South
From
County.
that
Yeah.
perspective, I support that.
She's
All
just
right.
pointing out.
And we have plenty of
Yeah.
differential in here that we could move that boundary line up easily to incorporate those in there. The other boundaries aren't too terrible as far as I can tell. There's a little jiggling for Bass Lake perhaps. To me, the revised 2 might be the better one to
play
tweak-
with.
To tweak a little bit here and
I would
there.
agree based upon what I'm seeing here.
So that was our point, George. We're
right.
actually trying to help you out here.
We're trying to figure out which is the preferred of the 3 new versions, right?
Yeah.
To make the tweaks
Okay.
to, I think.
Which one do we
Yeah.
take?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think that's what we're coming down to. So,
And Cameron Park is together in that map,
Right.
right?
so is anyone on,
We
are any of the
heard you.
board members, George has spoken adverse to revised number 2 over revised number 1. Is there a preference? I prefer revised number 2, I believe, but I would still want some tweaks to it. And to the-
Yeah,
to the extent we can.
I
right?
like number 2 with tweaks.
Okay. And George, you want to weigh in on this one? Number 2 with tweaks? That's,
Well, definitely.
Yeah. But I mean, if we move that boundary line up a wee bit and get those communities as a whole better.
Well, the biggest thing is, when mostly Pleasant Valley at one time was represented in District 2, too, half of it anyway was. And even with the first version of the map that we have, it won't be anymore. It'll be in
Right.
District 3.
Correct.
so for
Right.
example, on revised number 2, if we took that green part that's next to Cameron Park, that's currently within District 2, we included some portion of that or all of that in District 1, then we could expand the District 2 to balance it out.
Right,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
I
And that
also
means it
think,
would reflect on District 3 and
District
Again.
5 is neutral on either of these because it doesn't affect, honestly.
Not a whole lot of
Okay.
difference.
Doesn't
Right.
It's literally
affect-
6 people.
I
Yeah.
could,
yeah, and it looks like the same lines.
Basically the same line with one little tweak. It's the
Right.
same.
I could see some value in, if we needed to expand District 3 to accommodate more of District 2 in that area. I could see some value in expanding the Diamond Springs, El Dorado boundaries to encompass more of the Missouri Flat Corridor, the west side areas, because it looks like I need to blow it up a little more, that we're just on the edge of El Dorado. I'd want to make sure that those communities were a little perhaps more whole. That
Mhm.
might be better, if that could help us accomplish some of the direction here today.
Well, you will see that in map 4.
Okay,
Map four.
any other board comments on revised number 2? It seems like that overall is preferred over revised number 1. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Perhaps.
Okay, with tweaking,
At this
obviously
point-
not as is, but with some tweaking,
Yeah,
right?
at
Yeah.
this point.
And it probably depends on the degree of tweaking you can accommodate and still keep the deviation number within reason. So,
Right.
okay, I think we're ready to go then to the third map.
Okay, the third map is the Pollock Pines alternative. This was developed at the request of the redistricting team with the purpose of putting Pollock Pines in a district other than 5. In order to do so, much of the North and South County need to be included in District 5 to make up for the loss in population. Starting on the east side of the county, District 5 includes South Lake Tahoe, west to Fresh Pond and Jenkinson Reservoir, south to Somerset and Mount Occam in the South County, and includes Mosquito and Volcanoville in the west in the North County. District 3 combines Pollock Pines, Camino, Placerville, and much of the El Dorado Diamond Springs community. District 4 contains Shingle Springs, Rescue, and much of the Divide. District 2 encompasses Cameron Park and the South County from just south of Diamond Springs, El Dorado to Somerset and Outingdale. And District 1 contains all El Dorado specific plans in their entirety.
So as much as I appreciate.
You would need a helicopter on this one.
Yeah, but I understand because we asked.
Yeah,
right.
just to try it.
Pines, rightfully feels like
Right.
they are a community of interest and want to keep whole.
Right.
And especially the fact that, I'm up on the basin for 80% of the time. So could we keep it a mountainous kind of an area? But no, that really doesn't work.
You could get in the Jeep and go down the Rubicon to get to your district.
I've been in the Rubicon a lot on that district.
It looks like District 5 is kind of consuming the rest of the
It looks
district.
like a Pac-Man.
Screwing up everything else.
It's the Pac-Man.
It's a
man.
Pac-Man, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just throw this one out.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
say? All right.
Thank you.
District
I
2 looks like
appreciate
it's
But
shrunk
thank
in a
you
washing
for-
machine. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the effort.
It was
from,
good to try it
we-
out
We wanted
and
to
see
see
it.
what it would look
So
like. It's
the
like, oh, gosh,
population of
okay.
Pollock Pines is about 7,100 people. But that
Yes.
tells you how a
Yes.
population like that shifts things dramatically when you get
does.
into these more rural areas.
It's-
Moving at one side of the boundary versus the other in total
Yeah.
really changes it. So,
And, I'll have to say, at one time, South Lake Tahoe had 2 supervisors. Same thing, it was split up between Myers and the city of South Lake Tahoe. And, we actually enjoyed that because we had 2 supervisors that helped understand what was going on up in Tahoe. And so it was actually, we thought was very beneficial. We were very upset. There was a lot of controversy when they pulled that other supervisoral district away. So, it's split, but yes, you do have a little more power in that you have some other supervisory concerns that will come in. So kind of have to balance that, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's a tough one because I do feel that it's difficult and they want to feel, as a whole and certainly try to get there, but it's just not working on this.
No.
We tried though.
Yeah, we did.
was
But thank
fun.
you.
awesome. No.
Believe the board said toss alternative 3.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I don't think we need to consider it any further. Thank you for presenting it, because again, it shows the dramatic contrast to when you
Yeah.
change a
Yeah, no,
line
it's
just a little
interesting
bit,
to see.
where everything else has to go to balance the population.
Well,
So,
until you see it, you
Yeah,
don't really
Yeah.
get it when you were just talking these numbers.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was good to see it. Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, I
Yep.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the 3 maps. Is there any other discussion, I guess, by the board members on the first 3 maps? I'm guessing at this point, we got to take public comment on these first 3 maps and then deal with map 4 as a separate entity. Is that?
I,
Go on time.
Uh,
I think we should include 4.
I think we need-
I would suggest if you and or Supervisor Turnbull want to introduce a 4th map, I
Okay.
think now is the time to do it.
All right, then let's introduce the 4th map. Let me give you a little bit of the backdrop, and Debbie Manning, who's here from the chamber, can help me with this. But based upon the previous meeting and looking at the concept of dividing, kind of started from dividing El Dorado Hills in 2 districts equally. And then it was modified to say, well, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but what could we do to create a map that would allow primary communities of interest, including Cameron Park, to be as much as possible in 1 district and not split up? And there was a discussion that involved the homeowners associations, it involved Black It involves APAC, and involved a number of different people. Debbie convened a meeting. There was a large discussion. It came to a conclusion that let's propose a map, and recognizing that at that point in time, when we got to that decision point, that there was no longer the ability to ask the surveyor to build a map. John Davy in particular took on the responsibility to try to create a map using the GIS system to submit. And he had any number of difficulties doing that. He's a pretty talented guy, but he couldn't walk his way through of creating a map. So Debbie reached out then to the surveyor's office and said, hey, we're having difficulty trying to work this process of using the system that's online. Can you help us come up with a map configuration? Because we're not able to do it ourselves. And that's what evolved into, okay, we now have a fourth map. Here it is, but it did not have wide distribution. And the reason it took longer to get this present was that we needed to circulate that back to the participants who had come up with the ideas to create this fourth map. And then it went back to George and I to review, since we were the primary areas that were affected by it. And we can only have two supervisors discussing it. Do we support this map as another alternative? It's not necessarily my first choice, I'll tell you that, but it's another alternative. It takes a different split. And the primary difference is use Highway 50 as the separator between District 1 and District 2. So everything on the south side of Highway 50 basically becomes District 2, which will include the Eldorado Hills Business Park, all of the age-restricted communities, Four Seasons, Lennar, all that becomes part of District 2, which some of it is in District 2,
District
and
2
some of
already,
it isn't.
yes.
Four Seasons is in District 1, Lennar Heritage is in District 2. The business park is split in two right now with the current map we had. So that was the thought process that went into it. But clearly we just ran out of time to be able to get this implemented, to get it approved by George and I, as to say, this is a viable alternative. And so that's what took so long. So we came to that conclusion yesterday, and here we are today without having a distributed map because of the time constraints involved. So, yes. Yes, we do. I know Brian's got it over there. So maybe we could go ahead and put that on the wall someplace at this point for them to review. And I know our CAO has some additional comments. So,
And Jennifer, either Jennifer, if we could pull it up online as well. I just want to add my role in this. Because I got involved because the surveyor's office initially took the position that they weren't going to prepare a fourth map, and rightly so, because they were reached out by the community, and it had passed the deadline that the community was told they had their maps in. I talked to Supervisor Heidel and Supervisor Turnbull on Friday. They both supported the concept. From my perspective, this was a once in a 10-year thing. If board members wanted to bring something forward, they could present it. It was my intent. They would present it today. I had no idea it would be shared publicly before. And that's where I think the process fell apart, because then it did blindside other board members. And now you were getting comments on stuff you hadn't seen, and that's not fair.
Right.
And I think it goes beyond that, quite honestly. We've had an issue before where a board member or two went outside of what the board had talked about, and it causes a lot of, what's the right word? It doesn't help with the harmony of the board when you have folks that go outside of what we talked about at our last meeting. And the board's direction was not to pursue another map after the deadline, not to waste more staff time. I distinctly remember those words. We had a huge conversation about what to do and what not to do. And you know, this has been a hard year with this board. And I'm very concerned that if this kind of stuff keeps happening, it's never going to get better. So I think we need to work on being a little more respectful to each other in our conversations and following through on what we decide as a board, because it has happened before and it causes a lot of grief. And I honestly do not appreciate how this happened at all. And I get you don't want to violate the Brown Act, but this is beyond that. This is actually going outside of our conversation as a board, our direction, our limited resources, all of that. And in my mind, it looks very backdoor. It's not transparent. This is not how we should be doing things. And that's I'm really disappointed.
Let me just comment, this was not board member originated, this was community originated, and they will explain that to you when they get a chance. So maybe understanding it from their perspective will help understand that this was not something a board member said, hey, we got to jam this through. It was a discussion with a group of community people who said, we want to see El Dorado Hills divided more equally. And we also are concerned with the current boundaries that we have, that we need to come up with a different way to do this. And that's what it was, a novel approach.
And we had that discussion as a board,
Right.
that we were not going to accept
But
more
remember-
maps, and we weren't going, no,
remember-
and they could have
Okay.
used the maps that came out publicly to the whole world and tweaked them a little bit, just like we had a conversation today, to keep the communities whole.
This is not a
So
tweak, this is huge.
that's my point.
And that's why they tried to enter it into the GIS system consistent
Don,
with the timelines that were given. And that process failed.
And you helped bring a map, and quite honestly, the way I'm looking at it, this doesn't even follow the direction you talked about last time. So
This was the
You're-
community's
you're-
request. It wasn't my request.
I think I'm gonna jump in here for a second. There was a map at the first redistricting meeting that we had that showed a similar concept of El Dorado Hills split in half like this. The board did not choose to go in that direction.
absolutely.
With Highway 50 as a boundary?
The point is, we weighed that the first time. We chose not to go in that direction. And and we were also very specific about timing. So I do agree with Lori as far as our process was broken, but here we are. So I just shared Lori's comments and concerns.
Okay, very good.
It was
Understand.
outside of our direction.
Very good. So we now have a fourth map presented. So maybe we can start with George's comments on it and then other board comments on it. Is that okay? So George, your thoughts on this?
Well, the biggest thing is El Dorado Hills and the concerns with the residents in El Dorado Hills, because heritage and stuff, they wanted to make sure that, you know, that they were represented by District 2 and they had equal representations by 2 board of supervisors, also being District 1. So that was one of the biggest concerns that they had out there. And this is one of the reasons why this map was put together. You know, we have, I reached out, you know, Debbie has called me a couple times and stuff, and she was going to put this map together. All right. And it was sent in to you about this. And I feel this is a good map because of Pleasant Valley, Somerset, Outingdale, and now it's right back into District 2 again, where she should have been in the first place. The other maps taken Pleasant Valley completely out of it. If you look at this, Pleasant Valley is in, and also it goes up right on Sly Park Road, which was in District 2 before. Now it is back in District 2. The biggest thing is I understand that with the Cameron Park issue that it came up deal, but now Cameron Park's always been talking about they wanted 1 supervisor, but still south of Cameron Park, Highway 50 is still Cameron Park. So they're represented by 2 supervisors too, besides District 1 and District 2. The thing with the El Dorado, with some of the issues and stuff there, I mean, part of El Dorado, Crystal Boulevard was in District 2. It was really kind of weird. I don't understand why it was anyway in the first place. But just on the other side of China Hill is District 2, and this side is in District 3. So, and that was, and they felt that they always thought that I was in their district, I guess because my shop's there. So anyway, that's probably why, because that's how people think. But anyway, that was one of the biggest concerns. And the biggest concern that I had is making sure that Somerset, Outingdale, Fairplay, Mount Auckland, and Grizzly Flat, and all that area, and then also south in El Dorado Hills remains in my district.
Okay, so let me add my comments to that. We did have in this group discussion a desire for all of the age restricted communities south of Highway 50 to be within the same district. They felt that's a community of interest. They have a lot of common bonds. They have a lot of common interests. Integrity of neighborhoods, et cetera. So that was what this map presented that the other alternatives did not. It maintains that as a community of interest, integrated neighborhood, et cetera. And that was a big part of why we thought this was a viable alternative to bring back and say, hey, this is something different. And does this make sense or not in the big picture? I will note that this boundary, when we picked up part of Cameron Park in District 1, which I'm certainly not adverse to, puts my personal residence where I live into District 4. So I'm willing to accept that. If that's what the board believes is the right answer in terms of distribution of this, because all of the Lake Forest area right up against Folsom Lake is now in District 4 by this map. So that would take myself and my planning commissioner, who I happen to know lives right behind me, out of District 1 and puts us in District 4.
I don't think we should even be talking about where
All I'm
people
saying
live.
is the logistics part. of
I'm
it.
just saying
I'm
that should not
perfectly
even be
fine
part
with
of our
that.
discussions.
I'm perfectly
That's a
fine
good
with it, is what I'm
Should not be
saying.
part of our discussions.
Okay, it's already been part of our discussions, but that's okay.
So beyond that, though, please realize that this map was all about Eldorado Hills.
Yes.
And, you know, there was no concern for what it did to the other districts. It really kind of messes up with the divide, which we talked about prior. And I think that's why this earlier version of the map, there was a very similar, one of the 9, I'll call it, the one of the 9 first maps was very similar to this, and we said no to it already. So again, I'm really disappointed that this was even brought back. It's very similar to one of the 9 that we already said no to. It changes where District 4 is, Kelsey, Rescue. It moves things around drastically there. It is very Eldorado Hills centric and doesn't consider the other districts very well. So I don't think we should even be talking about this one today.
Well, we already are talking about it. We will take public comment on it, but I
Sure.
understand your comments.
As a board,
Those
we
appreciate
should
it.
follow through with our conversation we already had as a board.
Okay, any other board comments on this map? I guess, I'm not sure
I
if
do.
you can speak now or not, Sue. I don't know.
Yeah, no. You know, and again, neither of these affect my area per se.
Right.
So I'm trying to do this in a very unbiased manner.
Mhm.
Just looking at what you have here, I think, you know, your new map seems to have a little better definition on the southern part, on the southern area in here. I think the concerns that I'm hearing is that there's concern about this tweaking up here. So if there's somewhere we can move it to where that would make more sense, yeah, okay. Just seeing if there's a way to compromise in there somewhere.
From my,
Dawn? Oh, sorry.
from my perspective, this map is a non-starter for several
Okay.
reasons.
Okay.
Number one, it did not take at all into consideration the prior board's direction on keeping the divide whole. That divides that up pretty significantly. It completely decimates Diamond Springs, El Dorado, Placerville, does not keep that together. It divides Diamond Springs. That's,
Okay.
and yeah, I find that concerning. That was a conversation that we had. It splits Rescue and Cameron Park. Cameron Park is divided. And I think a really strong consideration is that South County, you know, it's predominantly rural. And then you have the El Dorado Hills Business Park in there, which means that decisions in the business park will be made by a rural supervisor. And I'm not talking anyone specifically, I'm just saying that this is predominantly a rural county that has no really connection to an industrial business park. And I find that problematic from an economic development standpoint and just a communities of interest standpoint, that the business park has far more synergy to the larger El Dorado Hills than it does Somerset, Pleasant Valley, Outingdale, and Fairplay. And to me, that is problematic for the economic health of our community, of our county.
Okay, understand. Appreciate all those comments that they're
Points about El Dorado.
valid comments.
It's kind of interesting because the business park, south of the business park and all that area down on Latrobe Road has always been in District 2. So, I mean, you're saying that it should be represented by District 1 or 1, period. But it has been represented. A rural, like myself, has always represented, you know, and other supervisors have also represented the business park and in District 1. So, and Heritage in that area, that development there.
I would just like to remind the board, in addition to not considering where each of you reside, you're also not to consider what has been done in the past. Because 10 years ago, there were reasons why it
Right.
was done. Those reasons no longer have changed. And so you're not supposed to consider what was done. You're supposed to consider how this should be done moving forward.
I think historical, there's a value though, historically to looking at that. You're saying that by law, we're not allowed to look at historical boundaries?
So I think what we're saying is that because you are required to follow this list of now mandatory criteria
Yeah.
in that prioritized order, that it would arguably be counter to that to kind of start with and rely upon the historical precedent insofar as the prior maps may have considered some of those criteria, but perhaps not in the same way that we are now required to. So I think that we're of course advising you to rely solely on the criteria that are established by the code. That's why the maps that were created, they generally, I do not believe the surveyor's office started with what we had and then tweaked. Rather, they generated them anew based upon the communities of interest that had been identified by the board and by those who participated in the process.
And I appreciate that opinion. Frankly, I always look at historical value. It has value. And it is important to look back, not per se as far as specific conversations in this, but it's very important to understand where we've been as a county in the past, to understand, how we can move forward. And it shouldn't have a bearing on this per se, but it is, and it should be. It's, to me, you can't.
It's just interesting and it's not a criteria.
Well,
Right? I mean, we can't use it as a
There's a lot
criteria.
of value understanding where we've been. It doesn't mean,
The
you know, that-
progression, yes.
Yeah.
And Supervisor Novosel, I'm not dismissing that. We
Okay.
always like to look at history
it
just
sounded
so we
like,
don't
I just
repeat
wanted to make sure we're
mistakes.
clear. It's not.
We now have, based on the updated legislation, we now have specific criteria we must follow.
Right.
And
Now,
that's,
I
and
get
that's
that.
not one of
I
them.
get that. I just
Yeah.
want to be clear that the
Absolutely.
history will always have a big value in our conversations, please. Thank you.
And just to be clear about some of the criteria, with respect to communities of interest, the law is clear that communities of interest do not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. And the only thing that's then kind of expressly prohibited later in it is that the board cannot adopt supervisorial district boundaries for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against a political party. Now, there is some debate as to whether criteria that are not expressly listed here are still permissible. So I think some jurisdictions have, for example, taken a position that they can consider as kind of an optional criteria. Again, not as a definition of a community of interest, but the location of an incumbent or historical lines. I think that is a risky approach. And that's why we've advised you to follow strictly the criteria that are given. And I do appreciate that. I think there's been largely recognized by the board that, this isn't about identifying the location of incumbents. I think it's maps that have been presented have shown that that's happened in various ways. And the board, I think, appears to recognize that even to the detriment of their own interests at times. So I do appreciate that. I just do want to be clear, because you'll probably hear it from other jurisdictions that some are taking a different approach to that. They're taking a little bit more risk in including factors that beyond those that are expressly mandated. Again, the argument being we are required to consider these factors, but we are not precluded from considering certain others. Again, I find that to be a very risky approach, and I appreciate that this board has been willing to follow strictly the criteria that are established by code.
Sure.
And speaking of historical, I'm just curious, on this latest batch of maps, we don't have the current boundaries on it like we did
I
the
was
first.
Trying to draw.
And I
them in.
kind of went,
And the reason for that is just like council was describing, I think it actually is written that we cannot start with the old map and just tweak the lines, which is, that's what we used to be able to do. It made it easier. Now we really have to start with those communities of interest and build the map from there, not considering at first, at least, any existing lines.
Well, but again, I'll voice my concern. History is important, and to take a look at those lines, so you understand if it's moving one way or the other. Otherwise, because we don't have specific streets on here.
I'm Sharpie.
And I'm-
She's got a Sharpie.
I have a
going
Sharpie on
but-
these because I want to understand how
Yeah.
that affects people that are calling me saying, am I in your district? I can't tell by looking at this to understand that. And all I'm trying to do is figure out exactly what we're talking about as a communities of interest. They want to be a part of the community. I can't tell if they are by looking at these maps. So that's why I'm just trying to get that understanding. So.
Certainly a fair point. I will note, though, they are those, the existing district boundary lines are not shown on the maps, the PDFs that are presented. In the mapping application, that is a layer you can turn
Yeah.
on and off, so you can
Okay.
see.
No, I'll just use Sharpie. I'm okay. Thank you.
And I would just like to, again, make the statement that the El Dorado Hills community map was really focusing on District 1 and 2. The surveyor's office determined what the adjustments had to be for District 3, 4, and 5. So we were not focusing on that. Again, this could be tweaked to bring in more of the divide into District 4, and you could change, the District 3 could move down. I mean, again, this is the Jello mold, right? You could move things around, and using deviation, there might be an opportunity with this, with tweaks to this map to accomplish the things that you were talking about.
So
But
there's
I
some
don't know. It depends on it.
uncomfortable, there's some uncomfortableness about
Yes.
that, using this new one. So can we go back to the one revised and then tweak that as we need, understanding where your concerns are?
You're saying revise number 2?
Yeah.
Or excuse me, yeah.
Okay, so what I like to do is take public input
Yeah.
first, and then we can have the board
I'm
discussion,
thinking
if
that,
that's
yeah, I'm just
okay.
trying to find a good medium place to
Decide it
start.
again, what is the
Okay.
basis, like we did before, what is the preferred, and then what tweaks would we like to see
Yeah,
to it?
sounds good.
Okay,
Good.
because I thought that process worked pretty well, and I think
Yeah.
staff gets the right direction based upon that conversation.
Perfect.
So with that, Kim, if you would please open this up for public comment.
Now taking public comment on item number 1. Individuals will have 3 minutes to address the board. The timer will notify you when you have 10 seconds remaining to comment. Public comment will be taken first from those participating in the boardroom and then from those participating through Zoom. For those participating by Zoom, please make sure you unmute yourself when called upon. If you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record.
Chris Payne, Diamond Springs. I'm glad I came to workshop 3 because I know what people said at workshop 3. And I know that there was a similar discussion as there was early in this session about whether it was appropriate or whether somebody was trying to backdoor or whatever. That same kind of discussion happened in workshop 3 and in another perspective though. So I want the board to remember what the community wants is a redistricting map that works. For the majority, I believe, not for the perfection of having everything work, but for the majority. So I'm saying to you, I appreciate your candidness, but I think there ought to be some reserve in making sure that you all collectively work together. So here's my comments now to the John Davy, I don't even know him, produced a map with others involved, and it was presented today, and it is appropriate. Why? Because I took your city alternative, redistricting alternative, and I marked it up. And there's a similarity between what I marked up and what he ended up with. I live in Diamond Springs. He lives over in El Dorado Hills. How could that happen when I don't even know the gentleman? So when I saw that, I go, oh, this is pretty good because this person thinks similar to me. As you know, I'm a civil engineer and I love maps. So I took this as an exercise that and I've given you a lot of my maps to this board. But here's some of the things. Supervisor Thomas, there is no rural supervisors because of the redistricting process of the past. They had to make the populations work. So essentially, we do not have any rural supervisors because the numbers wouldn't allow for it. The law doesn't allow for it. So I just want to settle that. I know you didn't mean it that way, but there is an importance to that, to what I'm just saying. If you look at the lines about how you could move things, if you took Shingle Springs Drive.
Which map are you looking at, Chris? Are you looking at a particular map? I'm trying to follow you.
I'm talking.
Yeah, I know.
I'm speaking.
I'm trying to follow you.
Follow the last map, the one that wasn't sent out.
El Dorado
very
Hills
well.
community map. Okay.
Okay.
Shingle Springs Drive.
Thank you Supervisor Parlin, but I just don't want to waste my time. Okay. If you take that Southwest Pacific, excuse me, if you take that line of the Single Springs Drive and project it up to Green Valley Road, then there's some balancing that's going on here. I realized, but it kind of makes District 4 a little bit different. And I like that change that I'm proposing. District 2 shouldn't be above Highway 50. Currently, there's this peninsula of population that projects in the Cameron Park, Bass Lake area, projects above Highway 50. We got to eliminate that. District 2 shouldn't be above Highway 50 in that area of District 1, District 4. So fix that. I'm almost done, Supervisor.
Go ahead.
Okay. The total difference right now is I took it high, low, 7.67% or whatever that differential is, that's added up. I feel that's very appropriate. Bass Lake now, because of this latest one, is intact. It meets the requirements. It's what I would have done. It says the divide is intact. You know, this question of what is the divide, Lori knows. It goes down to Kelsey. It goes up to Georgetown. It's Quintet. It's all the way over to Cool. That's the divide. So the divide's intact. Whoever said it wasn't is wrong. It is intact. Bass Lake is intact. Divide's intact. Oh, I asked for hash lines, but obviously you don't have to do everything I want. But you didn't. I asked for hash lines on state and federal lands so that we would know then unincorporated area, the relationship that this supervisor has to federal and state lands is different than they have to private lands. So I just asked for some hashing because then like District 5, it gets smaller because of those hash lines. And it looks, this was so inappropriate because it was a waste of time, the Pollock Pines alternative. It was a waste of time because we should have.
So please wrap it up, Chris.
All right, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting off. I know I don't typically do this, but I'm a little bit involved here. Let's see, anything else that I've forgotten? I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Those are my comments. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Debbie Manning, El Dorado Hills Chamber of Commerce. I put a timeline together because I know there's a lot of confusion, and trust me, we're confused as well. But before I go over the timeline, and I'm hoping maybe I never take 3 minutes, but if I can have 5 minutes if I need, if that would be appropriate, since I am speaking for the chamber. How did we get here? Okay, before I do the timeline, Supervisor Novosel, I loved your statement. Tahoe used to have 2 supervisors. That's how we got here. That's how the chamber got here. In 2010, we have the same request. This is almost deja vu. In 2010, there was actually a supervisor nutting and a supervisor night map put together, trying to give the community with the largest population more fair representation. That was the chamber's goal. Simply, that was our goal. The first map, we'll go there. But before I go there again, Supervisor Thomas, and I think Chris kind of also touched on it. Your argument for the business park being rural could be the same argument for the 6,000 or 10,000 people represented in District 2 as well. So to have part of El Dorado Hills in such a heavy rural district, that in itself could be a problem. So what I do want to say about this map, I do want to thank Supervisor Turnbull and Supervisor Heidel because they genuinely were listening to their constituents. And I think after the meeting on October 18th, it was apparent where Supervisor Parlin, you say that this is El Dorado Hills centric. Well, I think we felt that it needed to be because once again, we were dismissed. There was really no discussion other than let's keep Serrano, which was great, HOA together. And kind of beyond that, there was no further board direction. Now, I will say with the map today, is the chamber thrilled? Does it meet our goal? No, it doesn't. I mean, you know, we're still, I didn't do the percentage, but you have 10,000, you know, in District 2, a far cry from having equal representation. But what I do want to share is after your meeting, the chamber pulled together the stakeholders who either had presented a map or who had made comments, because we wanted this to truly go beyond the chamber. We felt that the chamber's job was to help to bring the community together. We did that. We pulled a meeting. And I think Supervisor Heidel mentioned a lot of the groups, and I will let them speak for themselves. But we all came to a compromise. Was any said group completely happy? No, but we came to a compromise. We turned in, I personally turned the map request in on October 20th, 2 days before the deadline that was stated. Now, apparently I missed and the group missed, because the surveyor's office did let us know that only maps were accepted to the 22nd were in the GIS. So I totally missed that and the group missed that, our bad. So on October 22nd, as Supervisor Heidel noted, one of the members did try to go in and do the map by the deadline. He also said that you have to have a GIS license, which he did not have, and he tried other maneuvers to manipulate a map with no success. I'll also mention on October 27th, when we were hearing that these new maps were coming out, I went to the county website, and an error of the county, it said maps due to the BOS from the public by November 7th. So I did reach out, and that was an error. Obviously, the website didn't get updated. So again, the map you have before you is a map of interest of the El Dorado Hills community. Is it a perfect map? No. Are there going to be any perfect maps? No. But you know, from the chamber, I am extremely proud that we could pull our community together in under a week. And I'm extremely grateful for Supervisor Turnbull and Supervisor Heidel for trying to accommodate this request. There was no back room. This was, we tried as a community to do what was right. Did we make a mistake? Yes. Did the county make a mistake? Yes. But here we are today. And again, I hope this map will be made for consideration. And I will say once again, this is not the map for the chamber. This is the map for the community of El Dorado Hills. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Hi, I'm Greg Prada, Cameron Park. Cameron Park is 10.2% of the county's population. Cameron Park census designated place. That's equivalent to slightly more than half of district worth of population. It isn't supposed to be cracked under, you know, these new criteria. By splitting map 4 would split Cameron Park. And it effectively then gives El Dorado Hills, that has the equivalent population of 1.3 districts. It really gives them really good positioning to control 2 full seats. And that's just, you know, not right. But in any event, you'll make your decision on that. Anticipating that you may in fact go back to City 2, I wanted to make a brief comment about that. I did submit an email to the clerk, but I wanted to get this on record. There are some homes in suburban rescue there's a notch on the map already that picks up some of those suburban homes. Immediately to the west of that are three small communities. West of Starbuck Road, onto the Paradox Aquamarine neighborhood, and then also onto the small neighborhood of Travois. It's about 170 homes in total. I have a feel for that because I've walked that area twice. And in any event, they are really part of the Cameron Park census designated area. Those 170 homes are about 500 population. Assuming you want to tweak this other map, it actually would, by adding that there, you'd give some relief to the issue that Supervisor Turnbull mentioned. So anyway, I wanted to just get that on record so that you consider that if in fact you go that way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg.
Can I ask Greg a clarifying question?
Sure, yes, absolutely.
Did you talk to Travois Circle about that?
I didn't
request?
talk to
'Cause I didn't
them.
either.
I just know that, that
Okay.
it's immediately adjacent.
Yeah, I know. I
and
walked it
Those
too.
people go down Cameron Park Drive, just
Sure.
like the rest of us, to go to the supermarket and the gas
Yeah.
and on wherever they're going.
I think their address is actually Rescue. So it's an interesting thing. We should check in with them, I think.
Rescue, land-wise is rural, but there's this area and it already has been reflected in the existing map that, hey, we picked up these homes and this would just make the entire area consistent.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Can
you,
I ask
Greg.
Greg another question?
Sure.
Are you
Greg,
gonna
please come
change your
back.
editorial in the paper, Greg?
What?
Are you gonna do another follow-up letter to the editor? Are you gonna follow up on your letter to the editor, Greg?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I
That
don't
is
think
a
that's
clarifying
clarifying to this
question.
subject matter, but
Oh,
okay.
it's about this subject matter, trust me.
Well, I've been passionate about this Cameron Park issue for 10 years. 10 years ago, I lost on what I was trying to do. We had Supervisor Santiago was trying to help us, but it was no go. But, being in a small portion split off from the rest of the flock, it creates an identity crisis. And I think it causes some to just totally disengage with the political process.
Greg, let me ask a clarifying question. Is your preference the revised number 2 with the adjustments you talked about in the one rescue area? Is that your personal preference of these maps?
Well, I love the fact that all 3 maps shown today, kept Cameron Park whole. If that happens, I get what I want. I just think that this other area, because it's part of the same census designated place, that it would make sense.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments from people present in the boardroom? Seeing none. Kim, let's move it to the Zoom participants.
Now taking public comment from Zoom participants, taking public comment from Andy Nevis.
Hey, good morning, board. Andy Nevis, Shingle Springs. I would just say, we all in the community just saw this map this morning as well. And it's a little bit, I think I share the disappointment. It's hard, I'm looking at it on my Zoom screen, trying to make sense of it. And we're being asked to provide substantive public comment about a new alternative that hasn't been shared with the broader community. Apparently it's been shared in El Dorado Hills, but there's some significant changes that impact, Shingle Springs and the Divide and many, many other communities that I think really need to be vetted out. One thing I noticed just again from staring at the Zoom screen, it looks like we cut El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, Pollock Pines, and maybe even Shingle Springs into not just 2, but 3 districts, which is a huge problem with respect to the Brown Act, because if you want to have work together on an issue, you can't have all 3 of your supervisors in the same room in that discussion unless it's a noticed board meeting. So I think that's a huge, huge concern. It would separate Rescue from Shingle Springs. Our communities are very close. We use the similar infrastructure coming down, North Shingle to the Ponderosa interchange. It would cut up the Georgetown divide, has already been mentioned. And ultimately, I don't think that a new map is really necessary to address the very valid concerns that have been raised by some of the communities. And let me go into that just a little bit. So my preference, just listening here today, would be to use that current alternative 2 map as a base and then make the following tweaks in an order of priority. So first, I think, move that Bass Lake area into D1 if possible. Move the South County D2-3 line up. And then, if possible, move Heritage into District 2 with Blackstone. I understand they would like to be together with Blackstone, at least based on the comments that are on the record. And then to Greg's concern, if those suburban homes around Green Valley and Cambridge up there, if they would like to be together, I think you should take a look at that as well. But I really don't think we need a brand new map. I think we need to be just tweak, like was said, we should tweak the alternative 2 and see if we can get to something. We're not all going to be happy. I think we all know this. This is all trade-offs, but I think we can get pretty darn close where at least we can be respecting every community in the county. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Now taking public comment from Terry Chatfield.
Hi, I am a resident of El Dorado Hills, and I do prefer the new map. And I'd like to say something first. Every time I've been on a Zoom call or been in person, I feel like the board is not transparent and that there are specific people on the board who really don't think about the people who voted for them. And it just seems awful condescending that, you're talking about harmony of board, but forget about the harmony of the community that we live in. And the way that you have divided up the maps on the other ones, you separate a large part of our community that is literally next door to us. And we are Heritage and Blackstone. We are not specifically rural anymore. Maybe at one point we were. There's going to be a new subdivision going up on top of us. They're talking about rezoning part of the business park. So it has a lot to do with what is actually happening in and around our community. And I feel like every person who lives in specific zones or communities should have that right to have a say in that. And plus, when you look at the map with the little purple on there that takes the business park and Heritage out of our section, it's like one of those little squiggles that was on that first or second screen that you put up that says you really shouldn't do something weird. We feel like in a lot of ways on our side of Highway 50, like we are the stepchild, because everything we've ever tried to bring up or discuss, it always gets like pushed to the back burner. I mean, you can see the difference between when you drive on our side of Highway 50 as to the other side of Highway 50, which side is taken care of better. And that just seems to be an obvious. So I feel like we should all be on our side, kept together. It's not, doesn't seem like it is that difficult based on your opinions. It's because it didn't make it into a specific timeline, which I get. Timelines are important, but there were reasons given why that could not be done. And so it also in your comments, you are talking about how it shouldn't affect what each supervisor thinks, or districts you can't talk, but then you turn around and say something completely different when it affects something that's up by you. So I really feel like the board needs to listen to the community, all of the community. And it's just taken, I just really feel like we all get shut down in the meetings. You're actually, so I'm kind of disgusted with the board in a lot of ways, but I think they should keep our community together. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Now taking public comment from Ruth.
Good morning. Again, boy, you guys had a lot of meetings recently. Thank you for hanging in there. And I think you're doing a good job, and I appreciate all the maps that have been brought forward. A couple of comments. I live on a boundary line. I live on, well, I don't want to say where I live, but I live on a boundary line where half my neighbors are in one district and the other on the other side of the street or on the other. And I don't feel like many of the callers. I don't feel like personally this separates me from my neighbors. I don't know. I think that people may be reading personally. I know it's a very different opinion, but I don't think it makes a whole hill of a bean of difference, really, to me personally. And it looks like I'll probably be moving into a different district, which will be kind of something to get used to. I think I'll be probably going into District 3, it looks like, having been in District 4. But one of the things, Supervisor Thomas, I wanted to say, you were talking about the industrial park south of Highway 50 and how you thought it would go best with El Dorado Hills. And I have a different opinion because I see El Dorado Hills as basically a bedroom community. And I don't really see their connection to an industrial area any more than any other group. And also District 4 already has a lot of industrial areas, Commerce Way, et cetera, Merchandise Way, on and on. If you travel down Motherlode, there's a lot of industrial areas. So I don't think there's anything so unique about it staying in El Dorado, the El Dorado Hills area. I also want to be the first to go on record to say that I hope in 10 years, you are not doing this, that you have given this job to someone else. This is so clearly, I mean, thank you very much for your efforts, don't get me wrong, but this is so clearly a flawed process. I agree with everything Andy Nevis said about maps just showing up. I have this little teeny tiny cell phone, a 12 mini. Do you know how small that is? And I am doing this meeting on my phone. And do you know how tiny the map is? I mean, it's like the size of a postage stamp that I have to try to understand. 3 out of the 5 of you have shown that you have some innate biases regarding the boundary lines. Well, 2 of you have mentioned where you live. 1 has not mentioned, but I know she lives on a boundary line, and I appreciate her not mentioning it. But you can't possibly do this process without personal bias. And you are the highest level that there is that politicians get to do this process. When you're talking about other redistricting, it is citizen groups, it is other people. And I really hope in 10 years, it's not you. I think it's too difficult for you to do it in a truly unbiased manner. But thank you again for your efforts. That's it.
Thank you, Ruth.
Now taking public comment from 390.
Ken Greenwood here. Now, on the first time, on the first iteration ever in District 3 on virtually all maps. Pleasant Valley, Somerset cut in half, Sand Ridge, no. Maybe if we move the boundary line up a little north to the Cosumnes River, but I'm still there because I'm right over Camp Creek. Anyway, this would be my first time in District 3 in 30 years. Yes, I remember when Tahoe had 2 supervisors, and it was a good thing because I lived up there. And that's where at one time, a lot of people relative to the rest of the county lived, but not anymore. Anyway, I can't even see, I'm working off a phone, but not online. I have no idea what this map number 4 is. And so I'm a little disappointed that it's not been entered as because GIS was done and I clicked on the item 21-1713 a couple times to see if it might have gotten it updated somehow so I could pull it up on my computer screen. I'm not zooming this. My computer's not capable of doing Zoom. So I have to do 2 different medias, if you will. anyway, speaking from my perspective, the South County is no longer the South County. And that's a bit of a bummer. But I do see I am in the Placerville zip code. I'm right at the edge of it. I call it the most overused and abused zip code in the United States. But I also noticed that in El Dorado, we have a District 4 reaching around to poor reds, if you will. And it's kind of interesting. As far as the Bass Lake area is concerned, yeah, they've always wanted to be in El Dorado Hills, mainly because they wanted the added value. I remember Dave Cursorial saying in a public hearing in 1993 that yeah, that adds $20,000 to their home value. Oh, how cool is that? Anyway, and I agree with Ruth that you really shouldn't be doing this because you have too much at stake. And that's kind of been the problem with redistricting. And that's how we came up with gerrymanders and stuff like that. Anyway, good luck on this one. I think there's another iteration that needs to be gone through here. I think reconsideration of Sly Park Road area, and heaven forbid it be included in District 5. And I'm talking the lower Sly Park Road and Pleasant Valley. I think that needs to be in District 2, again, because it just doesn't share that warm fuzzy that Placerville and Diamond Springs and El Dorado have for District 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken.
Now taking public comment from Robert Williams.
Good morning, supervisors. I'm representing right now a community of interest comprised of the concerned citizens of Heritage Village, together with Blackstone, and more recently with the Four Seasons Civic League. Together we represent a very good portion of the El Dorado Hills area south of Highway 50. During the last meeting, I asked the question, how do you define a community of interest? I got a very vague interest or a vague explanation, but subsequently that same week, we submitted to the surveyor a request to modify your preferential map, which was map 1, to adjust only the El Dorado Hills section to reflect the fact that Four Seasons, Heritage, and Blackstone logically are part of the same community of interest, geographically, common economic interest, etc. And that unfortunately, we had not been recognized to that degree at all. In fact, if you just look at Four Seasons and Heritage alone, we are the largest senior community any place in the entire county. And what this whole activity has forced us to do is to take a very serious look at how do we really voice collectively the senior interest and also the interest of our neighbors of Blackstone in such a way that we do get the representation we deserve. In as much as clearly we do not have currently even representation on the Planning Commission. So what we would like to do and recommend is you take a very serious look at the map that our friends at the Chamber of Commerce put together, and we're very proud to have contributed to that effort. And just make the adjustments and concentrate on the adjustments to the El Dorado Hills map, such that our community of interest, Blackstone, Four Seasons, and Heritage remain in the same district, that we become part of District 2. Right now we're divided between 1 and 2. And please just consider moving forward that the largest conclave of seniors, together with another 1,400 plus homes in Blackstone, represents a very large segment of this area known as, and we do ask for representation appropriately. And we do endorse the map for 100%. Thank you.
Robert.
Now taking public comment from Jennifer Yoder.
Good morning, board. Excuse me. I'd like to thank Supervisors Hydall and Turnbull for bringing this alternative map forward, and especially to Supervisor Hydall for allowing discussion on it. I was a little surprised that it would be suggested that we do not even discuss this at this board meeting. I'd also like to thank the chamber, where I do happen to work, for bringing the community groups together to discuss this map. It's been a long process. There's been a lot of back and forth with the county at all levels. We tried to bring this map to the public, but were foiled on many attempts due to errors all around, as Debbie pointed out earlier. And I also concur with Ruth that there should have been a citizens redistricting committee to draw these lines. We, El Dorado Hills, are currently divided into 3 districts. Andy Nevis pointed out that that's a violation of the Brown Act. So I'm not sure how that works presently, but it also looks like in the 2 other proposed maps that you're considering that El Dorado Hills is still drawn into 3 districts. I hope the supervisors can remove themselves from their districts and their political futures. And remember that the districts belong to the citizens. You are the current stewards and not the owner of said districts. In closing, I believe the purpose of this map, the El Dorado Hills alternative, was to have 2 supervisorial districts with a vested interest in El Dorado Hills, the area of El Dorado County with the largest population and tax base, and also an area that is seeing huge economic development. I hope that you will strongly consider this map as an alternative and move forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Now taking public comment from Tim White.
Good morning, supervisors, and thank you.
Tim, you've got an echo. Can you move away from some device that's playing parallel?
That's happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Supervisors Parlin and Thomas indicated earlier that when this map, the map 4 alternative was presented, that they said that the board had chosen not to go in the direction of a new map, that there were 3 maps that were chosen. I just want to point out that the 4th map was not board driven, it was citizen driven. When citizens got together and looked at the 3 maps, they said, this doesn't really reflect what's in the best interest of, say, the El Dorado Hills community. Under, Deborah Manning and the chamber, they got some people together and we looked at the maps. We tried to come up with an alternative that we felt best reflected El Dorado Hills and north of 50. That's why you see the map 4, where everything south of 50, as Robert Williams said, the senior communities as a community of interest go into District 2. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, and I certainly appreciate all the effort that everyone's putting into these maps and the redistricting process, but ultimately, as a former boss of mine said, it's not efforts, it's results. So what results will come from this process? And again, I think if you look at the latest map that was presented, it does follow the criteria that was set forth earlier on. Natural divides, community of interest, Highway 50 is a divide, Cameron Park in one district. That's sort of the goal. But I ultimately recognize that you could say you're not going to start with just map 4. Seems to be a preference for map 2 from some of the supervisors. I think if you look at map 2 and consider all the comments and questions that have been made by people and significantly tweak it so that you accomplish some of the goals that are reflected in map 4, that will end in a good result. So thank you for your time and effort.
Thank you, Tim.
Now taking public comment from Maria White.
Hi. Am I on?
Yeah, you're on, Maria. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm a little nervous because I've never spoken in front of you and I'm not political. And what I want to say is it's really a personal comment. I attended workshop 3 and at that meeting, I heard Pollock Pines and the Divide had to stay together. At the same time, I heard Supervisor Heidel say several times that was anybody concerned that Cameron Park was going to be divided into 3 districts? And there never seemed to be a response. It was like, well, it's really important that Pollock Pines and the Divide stay together, but who cares about Cameron Park? It's only 19,000 people and they're in the suburbs anyway. Map number 5, which was presented by the Chamber of Commerce, was discounted almost immediately. And El Dorado Hills is a non-starter before the Board of Supervisors. I mean, that's what it feels like. Earlier, I heard one of the supervisors say, well, that looks like an El Dorado Hills centric, and that is a non-starter. And it just really strikes me that we don't count. I am a resident of El Dorado Hills. And I've heard today, I can hear it. I don't see your faces. I hear it in your tone of voice. What's wrong with El Dorado Hills? I mean, is there a perception that we're just a cash cow to the rest of the county? I mean, it's fine with me that we have the means to support other people in the county, but yet I feel like we're constantly discounted, that we are politically unimportant because what, we're rich? I mean, that's what I'm hearing. I mean, to me, Bass Lake is part of El Dorado Hills, but somehow Bass Lake is second class, but ooh, their homes are worth more because they get to be part of El Dorado Hills. I mean, that's really what I think I heard. And so there's this simmering resentment against us. And that's what I'm hearing. And I'm just asking, could you cut it out, please? Give us a chance. Give us some representation in it, besides just taxing us. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Now taking public comment from Don Wolfson.
Hi, Don Wolfson, Cameron Park. First of all, I'd like to say, just for laughs, that don't worry, there's no chance that I'm ever going to run for your jobs. You guys can have them. You know, I lived in El Dorado Hills before I lived in Cameron Park, and I agree with the people there. You know, obviously you can't keep the whole thing together. The population's too large. Do the best you can to get as many of them together as you can, but mainly I echo the sentiments of the people who have already stated, please don't split up Cameron Park. You know, we're a community. I don't like map 4 at all. Maybe take map 2 and tweak it as suggested by, you know, adding those rescue neighborhoods that are really Cameron Park, even though they're rescue. Please don't split my community up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn.
Now taking public comment from Kim Beal.
Good afternoon. Kim Beal, Cameron Park resident for over 50 years. One of the things I've liked that I've heard today and in all the maps that were brought forward to you on your agenda about the first 3 maps was that you did keep communities along Highway 50 together. Pollock Pines, Camino, most of Shingle Springs, Cameron Park, and a lot of El Dorado Hills. In no way do I think that Highway 50 ought to be a dividing line consideration between communities. I think it's more important to keep communities as together as you can. As far back as 20 years ago, this is to my second point, 20 years ago, Cameron Park was redistricted to have 3 different supervisors. So for 10 years we had that. Then 10 years ago, We went down to, in the redistricting, now only having 2 supervisors, and that certainly has worked much better. What I liked about the 3 maps brought forth today was that Cameron Park, for the first time in over 20 years, would have just 1 supervisor, and I thought that would be great. I do recognize that El Dorado Hills, there's no chance it can have just 1 supervisor for all of it. Your population's too big, and it's going to get more so. If today you, the board, do decide to go with the 4th map that was brought forth by the El Dorado Hills community, it's just going to be a 10-year period of time that you're going to have that small of a district for 1 supervisor. The population is just growing too fast. But getting back to my main point, I would like to, even if it's not Cameron Park, but I would like you to try to keep Pollock Pines, Camino, Shingle Springs, and the other communities that straddle Highway 50, keep those communities intact as they are by themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Cam.
Now taking public comment from Bob Hendricks.
Hi, good morning, board. Thank you for the time to speak with you today. My name again, Bob Hendricks. I am a Blackstone resident and also president of the Blackstone Homeowners Association, as well as one of the members of the community of interest formed between Blackstone, Four Seasons, and Heritage. As you probably know, Blackstone represents about over 1,400 homeowners. Heritage and Four Seasons combined represents about just over 13 homeowners, making up for some 6,000 residents. We very much favor the 4th map as introduced. I understand your frustrations with the fact that the map was not provided, as you would think, timely, but I assure you we have been working on this ever since redistricting topics came about. We've worked with Chamber of Commerce. Due to technical difficulties in getting those maps to you, we're sorry for that, but that in no way should discourage you from consideration of that 4th map. Blackstone, in all maps presented, remains within District 2. However, we have joined in a community of interest with our neighboring communities of Heritage and Four Seasons to support the desire to have the divider be at the Freeway 50. We know that El Dorado Hills will have to be divided simply based on population, and frankly, we appreciate the fact that we have 2 separate district supervisors representing all of El Dorado Hills. In hearing some of the comments from the Cameron Park residents, I'm really surprised that they would like to go to a single district versus having it divided at the 50, giving them 2 directors, 2 supervisors that would represent them at board meetings. It seems to me that they would rather have 2 votes rather than 1 vote when items impacting Cameron Park comes up. So just a side comment and something that Cameron Park residents should actually consider. At this point, I absolutely understand the fact that you've not had this map. This map has not been, the 4th map I'm talking about, has not been distributed heavily. And I would ask that the board delay any decisions, defer those decisions, allow that 4th map to be put out to the public and reconvene to consider that map. We within the Blackstone community support the 4th map. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bob.
Now taking public comment from John Davey.
Good morning, board. John Davey. I'm El Dorado Hills resident, 26 years. I'm vice president of the Bass Lake Action Committee. And before I get to my main points today, I know that you're surprised to see that map. I'm surprised to see that map. We've been working on it for 2 weeks and we were told there would not be a map. So I did not see it till yesterday afternoon. It has not been distributed through the El Dorado Hills community. The people who worked on it have seen it. Nobody else has seen it. So I'll just leave it at that. I appreciate the efforts that staff and the surveyor's office went to accommodate us in lieu of the date challenges that we had, and that the date challenge that was posted in there on the county website. And thanks to Don Ashton for helping us process this map. Looking at the 3 drafts alternatives before you today, the maps are 2-dimensional and they don't really inform you about what our neighborhoods look like. The fact that a fence line between my neighbor's backyard and my backyard should be used as the district boundary here in the Bass Lake Villages is presented in these 3 maps today. That suggests that this process is really not looking at real communities or neighborhoods as your primary criteria. I encourage you to correct that oversight. We've spoken a lot about communities, keeping Pollock Pines together, this community. We absolutely should. our Bass Lake area members, we support that. Keeping 14,000 neighbors in Serrano as a community is also important. We support that as well. Equally important is keeping our Bass Lake Village as a community. It's no less important than the other communities. We're talking about placing 500 homes in one district and the other 300 homes in our neighborhood in another district, and that's ridiculous. The guidelines in this process suggest that the first order priority is geographic contiguity, and the second one would be the second priority is the integrity of neighborhoods and communities of interest. These three draft alternatives violate those very two priorities, the intent of them for our Bass Lake community. And what district number we are placed in, 1, 2, 4, we don't care. What we care about is that our representation respects the character of our community, and that's our focus. I was happy to participate in the working group of El Dorado Hills residents, very disparate neighborhoods, and we dedicated ourselves to crafting a representational map that recognized and respected our suburban communities. And we recognized right away that the best way to keep neighborhoods and communities of interest together was to acknowledge that major boundaries, such as US 50 north and south, that already splits our communities, was the best approach to keeping neighborhoods together because we can't all be in one district. We are grateful to the benefit, the hard work of the county staff, surveyor's office, and Don Ashton to assist us in getting this ready. It does not address all of our concerns, and it just doesn't. But getting the map ready in less than 2 weeks, we believe that this is the best alternative that we could compromise on. So I encourage you to implement the intent of the map as best you can. And lastly, and I am over time by a few seconds, the political considerations in this process were our absolute largest obstacle. By law, you've said it today, political considerations are not to be a factor, but decision rests in hands of elected politicians. So we had to factor in how to respect your concerns politically to find the best results for our community. I would ask that after this process is completed in 2021, and each of you never has to touch this again as supervisors, that you find time in 2022, immediately 2022, to prepare a non-political mechanism for the 2030 cycle that takes this process out of the political hands of the board and places the responsibility in the hands of a citizen commission not appointed by the board. So I thank you for your time this morning. I know this is a hard process to get to. We just want to remind you to be respectful of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
There's no additional public comment.
Okay, I'm going to close off the public comment since this is a hearing, and at this point, we'll bring it back to the board for further discussion. Who wants to start?
Well, one of the concerns I know that Wendy had was basically breaking up El Dorado, and Diamond Springs. Well, that could be tweaked a little bit too, on the same way as just on the revised.
So which map are you referring to? So we all have the same page.
Talking about the fourth map.
Okay.
Okay, so that can be tweaked a little bit on that. And that could extend, because then that one could bring also up above Pleasant Valley, could bring into effect District 2 a little bit more to represent Pleasant Valley instead of split up there. But that would also just, and then Diamond Springs and El Dorado could still remain in District 3. So that's something to look at.
So let me also add some data to this, since I'm a numbers guy. I've been accused of that before. We did ask the surveyor's office to tell us for the 95762 zip code, which a lot of us consider that to be the greater boundaries of El Dorado Hills, what was the distribution? And it turns out that District 1 has 29,588 residents in it. District 2 has 10,096 residents in it. And District 4 has 6,885 residents within District 4 for map number 4. So you're ending up with 3 different supervisors representing the larger community of El Dorado Hills. And that's where we've been.
What was the District 4 number again, John?
6,885. So one of the original intents I know is to try to get El Dorado Hills into 2 equal districts. And clearly this map does not accomplish that, because the overriding consideration was, how do we keep communities of interest together? At least that's what I heard from the community group that was talking about it. So but we still end up with the same kind of situation I think we currently have, is we have a split for El Dorado Hills residents, 95762, between 3 different districts, District 1,
Right.
District 2, and District 4. So that changes in terms of numbers, but it doesn't change in terms of the broader representation. So I wanted to make that clear to people. It's not, as Debbie mentioned, I think this is not the ideal map for where they started, but this is where the community inputs ended up. So I'll just add that to the discussion. And my personal thought at this point is maybe there is a derivative of map number 4 and a derivative of district number 2, revised number 2, that we ought to ask staff to look at and bring back to us, where there is more time to really consider that map number 4, recognizing, the timelines. It was extremely unfortunate that there wasn't sufficient time to post it, get it distributed, get comments, but I'm going to suggest when it's all said and done that we have a follow-on public type of meeting before we get to the board designated meeting to make the decision for more public input, but that we might consider taking 2 maps and giving specific direction on how staff could bring those back for additional discussion. So that's kind of where I'm headed here, but I want to hear other comments from other board members. So.
Right. I'll go. I really appreciated the way that Kim Beal explained it, because sometimes I have thoughts in my head that the words don't come out quite as well as they're in my brain. And Kim said it really well, as far as keeping the communities together and not using Highway 50 as a divider. And I kind of get that, because I have half of Shingle Springs right now. I haven't had a town hall meeting for Shingle Springs because I'm like, I only have half of it. And it's made it really interesting and a little bit awkward. And I can see where Cameron Park also, I have a chunk right now. And it's like, if I have a town hall meeting for Cameron Park, well, does only that one chunk want to come? So that's the difficult part for, I think, the representation. And I get El Dorado Hills, don't get me wrong. It's just, you guys have grown so big. We can't fit you in one district right now. And that's the challenge in my mind. Which is why I threw out my 7 district idea. And I'll keep throwing it out there because I think ultimately we may have to go there to really get good representation. So I kind of would prefer, in my mind, that we take the revised number 2 map as our starting point from today and see if we could, looking at it, move the Bass Lake Hills. Here's the biggest problem I see, quite honestly, is that the map that, remember the Delta map that we were given that showed the variation of each district, how much they've grown and towards our target population. And District 2 is the one that grew by like 3,000 or 4,000. That's really the big problem. That's where the growth was. That's what's making this so disparate. That's our challenge. And so I get it, George, you want to keep everything, but you can't. So, I mean, that's our challenge. So in my mind, if we start off with the revised number 2, which is fundamentally where most of the districts, are laid out pretty well from prior conversations with the prior community conversations, whereas Shingle Springs together, Cameron Park is together in this revised number 2 to start off. But we take that boundary, I think I'm trying to describe with words here, but the southern boundary of District 3 and the northern boundary of District 2, where the orange and the green come together, shift that upward to make those communities more whole, because those
So you're
communities.
talking about Pleasant Valley and Somerset area? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, my arms aren't that long.
Push those into D2.
Yeah, push that boundary upward.
And that's the biggest issue, because, because you're splitting up them communities, just like you said, you're splitting up Diamond Springs and El Dorado.
We agree with that 100%.
We do.
Yeah, we agree with
And the
that.
biggest thing is, and I still believe, we could bring this down in District 1 a little bit more, because they feel like Blackstone and those areas and Heritage and stuff. And that could still, you don't have to be Highway 50. It could be White Rock, White Rock Road, or
Absolutely.
whatever. So.
But the problem is you can't have 4,000 more than everybody else. That's our challenge. It just is. And
But
Right.
those people want, they want 2 supervisors in that particular district and they want
Well, that's not a
representation.
criteria though that we have to work with. It's
understand
the
that,
community
Maureen. I
part.
understand.
So I'm trying to work with the criteria that we're supposed to, keeping the, comments about keeping Cameron Park together, your Pleasant Valley and all that together. So if we move that one boundary up a wee bit, I don't know the number at all, how many that is, from our percentage. And remember, this District 2 map was fairly evenly distributed between the districts, so we have some wiggle room here. My thinking also is with the Bass Lake Hills over there, where there's the green, yellow, purple coming together. Probably want to see if we could, what do you think? Try to put them back into District 1? Is that probably the best one to try, you think, first?
I think the numbers will work with a variation of like 6% deviant.
Okay,
deviation.
yeah.
So I think
So if
that
we
works,
do
but we
that-
would need to get them to confirm it. Yeah.
And that will help with the jiggling of 2, because it'll take some out of 2 and we want to increase 2 over here. So that could work potentially. And then it's the southern part of El Dorado Hills, I think, is our biggest challenge. If we can figure out how to fudge that to make them feel more whole, it's just the reality of numbers. I don't know if we can't get all of El Dorado Hills in one district. So somewhere we're going to have to just have some kind of a sensible break there in the southern part. But other than that, there's, to me, the very minor tweaks needed on this map
Well,
to
the thing-
accommodate a lot of stuff.
The thing is with the original map, the original districts, right now, it's White Rock Road. It's not Highway 50 South,
Correct.
Well, it isn't White Rock Road either, because half the business park is in District 1.
half,
So
half of it.
there's nuances
I
to
know,
say it's
I
White
know,
Rock
but
Road.
anyway, that's
Right.
part of it.
Yeah.
So
So I don't know where you guys think is the best place to try to split that up-ish.
Well, I
know.
mean, that's a start. I mean, we look at White Rock Road, think about that. That's,
as our boundary.
yeah, as a boundary and see how that splits the 2 districts up and see if the population changes any there.
No, I get that. But so to me, those aren't, well, in my mind, they're minor because it's on a piece of paper, but I know for the surveyor's office, it might be a bit of work to try that out and see if we can get within our delta, the differential, and still try to keep the communities whole. Because that truly is what I think we've been hearing throughout this whole process, is trying our best to keep the communities whole. And Ruth, you're right. Hopefully this will not happen. This was not how a normal census redistricting
Right.
process would go.
We didn't want this process
No,
either.
it
We
want
did not
this.
want
We did
this.
not
No
want
way.
And it
The
was
reality
just-
was the committee would never come to a conclusion in the short timeline that was available.
Yeah.
We're
and
having a
so
tough time and we're trying to force
COVID
it. So,
impacted
yeah.
us. And, but my understanding is, and I did not participate last time, my understanding is it still gets political no matter what. So because it has to come to the board ultimately. So, but it would have been nicer, I think, to have the citizens committee. Absolutely.
Right, and I agree. And I kept quiet too. I didn't say anything until today.
Well, that was silly.
Well, I know it was, but because I was a little, you got to understand that, I mean, especially when some of that map, like that one map, oh my God, I'm glad we threw it away.
The Pollock Pines.
Yeah, the Pollock Pines redistricting map, which was absolutely ridiculous.
Well, the whole
And
intent again
not only
was.
that, Sue, you would have had a helicopter, trust me.
Oh,
You would
yeah,
have had
no,
a
no,
good-
no, but the whole intent, was.
I totally understand.
If we asked for
do
that.
Yeah.
Right, but that particular map was,
Yeah, no,
Right.
I know,
Yeah.
throw that one out. I'm glad we kicked it
But
to
you
the
got to
can.
see it to understand what it
And-
means.
I
when you
understand,
say
I understand.
shift the
And
line, right?
out of
We
with the
directed
first
it.
9, I know, even the first 9 map storage, we had maps that were kind of,
Yeah,
Yeah, but.
We
but
all-
when you
we
look
all
at this
drafted
thing,
maps the first time we didn't
District 2
like.
shrunk- It's the
Yeah.
smallest, I mean, it's smaller in District 3 almost, so.
Right.
it's just.
so I don't know if you guys
Just
think
like-
that's a good starting point for another map.
Well,
That would
I think
be-
like John was talking about, I think we need to take and look at both the El Dorado Hills map and the revised 2 and then
Tweaks
come
to
up with,
both, tweaks
and
to
tweak
both.
some both and come up with something.
No, I don't think we should try to tweak the number 4 map. It's so far off in other areas. I think that the District 2 map actually keeps El Dorado Hills fairly together, which is what they all said they wanted today, but just move Bass Lake Hills a wee bit
And
into one. And John Davy said into one, Bass Lake Hills needs to be in one district or another. He doesn't care which one, as long as they're all together.
Right.
So, but my thinking is it should probably fit into District 1 if we do some fudging with the boundary line down on the south. That's that, and maybe that would be where we want some variations the next time is come back with some different variations of what we can do down there in the South El Dorado Hills to take a look at those numbers and use the differential as much as possible. Just go for it. And Dave will, hate it, but if we're trying to keep a community together, I think it'll work. We can try.
I agree with your idea of tweaking based on today's comments to the revised map 2. And as we're looking at pulling the boundary of District 2 north and northwest to encompass Pleasant Valley and Somerset in that area, I would ask that once again, we extend the boundaries of Diamond Springs, El Dorado. I think it's important that the MC and FP area needs to be in District 3. Right now, that is not. And that's certainly a financial community of interest. So I think that's really important. And then Diamond Springs, El Dorado needs to be together a little more. And so if we're having to gain some ground in District 3, gain it in those areas. And I like the idea of encompassing the Bass Lake in District 1. And I appreciate that Cameron Park is in one district in this map and that Rescue Shingle Springs are not divided up. I think in the El Dorado, the fourth map, the communities of Rescue, Shingle Springs, and Cameron Park are all decimated there. And I think that's really problematic.
Yeah.
So, as well as Diamond Springs, El Dorado, there's a lot of communities here that are decimated. And I don't know how you would tweak this enough to keep those communities of interest whole. So that's the concern I have with that. And like you say, it's so challenging with the growth on the west. I understand and certainly do not want the residents of El Dorado Hills to think that we don't care about them. That is, gosh, if that came across today, my apologies. That's certainly not true. And I like your idea of, revisiting 7 supervisors, perhaps once this is done.
Yeah, not now.
So that everyone has more representation, recognizing the challenges of our vast and diverse county. This is really hard to divide up equally so that all communities, feel that they are fully represented. So that is certainly our goal in that. And this is not a perfect process.
Are you liking that direction?
I do. I think the revised 2 makes sense, and then tweak that to bring in the pieces in there that we can agree upon. I think that's a good compromise.
It's a good direction.
Okay.
It listens to what the communities were saying.
I'm going to make one kind of final observation, and that is that when the redistricting information came out from the state, the session I participated in for 2 hours to listen to all the reasoning, basically the message was start with a clean sheet of paper. And we have not done that. And there are reasons why we have not done that, because we keep talking about maintaining our communities within a given district. So from that perspective, I had one conversation with our CAO about, well, maybe this becomes a hub and spoke type of districting process. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. And if you look at what other counties are currently proposing, Placer County was one in particular I looked at. They have some alternatives and stuff, and they have big blocks. But it's really a function of what your population density is in given parts of the county. And we have a much more rural region, i.e. we have a lot of U.S. Forestry Service lands and stuff than other counties do. So we are somewhat unique in that capacity. And I'm not in favor of breaking up existing communities, certainly, but I do think when we whoever revisits this in the next 10 years has really got to look at from this perspective of independent of who's currently in a seat, what do we have, how do you do it properly? I think John Davies' recommendation was great, but I don't think we can encumber future boards with that. We could provide a recommendation that would stay within the county, and when it comes back, but I don't think a resolution or anything is appropriate. Maybe it takes on some other form, but I do think it's important to capture our lessons learned from this process, and it's not been an easy process, and make sure that information is provided to the next board to the best of our ability to try to help them understand the difficulty we had. And hopefully they don't have a tight timeline and they can appoint a committee, but the committee, I think, could still use the criteria as guidance. That's all it would be, but I would hope that would be an outcome of this. Because I'm always looking for, how do you take what we learned and make sure that that's provided to the next generation in terms of not as a direction, but as consider these things when you go through this same process, right? So, and that's kind of where we're all in my comments. Anybody else on any go backs?
Well, my personal opinion, I think it should be up to the, the residents of El Dorado County to decide what these maps should be. It shouldn't be up to the Board of Supervisors. It should not be up to a lot of the county staff, because it should be what they want. And they should have equal representation. And I feel that sometimes they don't. And I agree with some of the things like Debbie said, and like she said, they need 2 supervisors to represent El Dorado Hills. Now, I don't understand why Cameron Park wants 1, because it would be better to have 2, because if there's issues in Cameron Park, all right, or Shingle Springs, if you have 2 supervisors representing that district, that's 2 votes, like Debbie was talking about. The problem is when you have 1 supervisor, the other supervisor, who cares what Cameron Park thinks, or who cares what Shingle Springs thinks, especially if they're not in that district. But if you have 2 supervisors representing that particular area, or these different district, these different areas or communities, it's a good thing, my personal opinion. But I don't know how anybody else thinks, but that's how I feel. So, okay. But I still think that the residents should be able to decide what they want.
They don't know that there's
I know.
conflicting.
Yeah, I know.
I wish it was that easy.
That's not going to work.
I know, but I think that they should have some kind of input. I think they should be able to bring a map forward to present.
But ultimately, the Board of Supervisors approves the final map, the way the law is written today.
I understand that, John, but what I'm talking about is the communities should be able to have the right to draw up the maps, what their best interest is. Just like what Debbie put together here on this 4th map.
I agree.
Which was a good thing. And I think the other communities should have the right to do the same thing. So
right.
That's my
personal. This has been a very tightly constrained.
Understand.
So David had some other comments.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to address a couple of the comments that I just heard, and to echo Supervisor Turnbull's point about the public having the opportunity. I guess I would just clarify, I think the public has been given the opportunity to provide maps throughout this process. We've done a series of workshops and a lot of outreach. I think ultimately this is a representative democracy. And so this board has been elected to represent their interests and to vote on it. And as Supervisor Heidel noted, you are under the system that this board elected to follow for adopting redistricting in 2021. You are the final decision maker with respect to that. I want to note, though I hope that doesn't come to this, but I do want to note that there is an ability for the public members to if they disagree with the map adopted by the board. I believe that the final map is subject to a referendum process if they take issue with it. So there is even that further check to ensure that the public is a part of the process. I did just want to then address just 2 other things that I just heard. To the extent that there was a statement made about needing to start from scratch. I believe that we have done so here. I think that the maps that were presented based on my conversations with the surveyor's office, they were prepared in a way where they started from scratch based upon the information they had on communities of interest that have been identified. I think that's furthered by the fact that there were a couple of maps that were presented that looked very different than the existing district boundaries. I think that showed that there was the process did start anew. I recognize that the board chose not to go in that direction, but I think from a process standpoint, we did what we were charged to do. I also wanted to comment on the notion of drawing the district lines in a way that would, for the purpose of providing multiple supervisorial representation for a particular area. I do, and I think Supervisor Parlin noted this earlier, I do find that to be a problematic premise for drawing district lines, in that it appears to recognize that there exists a larger community, and yet intentionally wants to split that community for the purpose of increasing their representation on the Board of Supervisors. I do think that runs contrary to what we are charged to do in drawing district lines. Obviously, there are going to be times because of population where that is going to be the case, where we do have to split certain communities. I mean, that's just a fact of life when we have a population in our county that is very dense in certain areas and very disparate in others. But I just do want to note that because I think we've heard that through a number of the speakers. And it is my opinion that that would not be a permissible basis on which to create your district lines.
Not permissible, but in some cases.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
I will go back to a comment I made very early, though. If you were going to do this without any representation, you'd call them districts A, B, C, D, and E.
Right.
Don't assign a number to it that's associated with the supervisor, right? That would be the more objective way, I would think, is as soon as you label it, you make it political. And that's unfortunately not one of the criteria, or it's fortunately not one of the criteria, but it always enters into the discussion, whether it be board members or the public. That's always going to be a factor. So maybe that's one of the recommendations if we do something like that.
Yeah, and I agree with
future boards.
Yeah, I agree.
We are here. So I think it's time to go ahead and move forward. Do we have someone who would like to offer a motion at this point?
Sure.
Okay.
Based on our conversation, I would like to make a motion that we start with the revised map number 2 and ask staff to, I guess we're gonna have another meeting, it sounds like. The goal was, I thought today to kind of get closer to a final, but we're not there. So, and we only have time for one more meeting, correct? Is there, how? What do
We have time, Jennifer, we have time blocked out on November 16th
Okay,
to have one more.
okay.
Okay. Hopefully that would be sufficient based on the conversation. I agree, you probably need to have that discussion before we bring an ordinance back for the
Sure.
board to adopt a map.
Okay.
So
So then start with revised map number 2. Show us some variations perhaps of moving the boundary north-south between District 3 and 2, move that up-ish to get those communities as a whole.
You're talking about the communities of Pleasant Valley, Somerset,
Yeah,
those like
thank you. Yeah,
communities.
I can't, sorry, I cannot see these maps. I just can't see them. And then moving over, Supervisor Thomas, where was the boundary that you wanted to try moving a little bit?
Because District 3 would need to gain ground, then it would be appropriate to make sure that the communities of Diamond Springs and El Dorado are in one district, and those aren't split, including the MC and FP area in Diamond
there it is,
Springs,
right.
which is a financial community
In
of
the
interest.
revised map of 2, it looks like to me it's not. So anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also show variation of Bass Lake. The Bass Lake area wants to be in one district. I think preferably District 1 if possible, but if not, either 2. Well, based on what John Davey said, even 4, but let's try 1 or 2. As long as they're together, let's keep them together in a variation. And then unfortunately, Eldorado Hills just cannot all fit in one district. So we need to somehow show some variations on the down there, White Rock Roadish, Eldorado Hills. We need some variation down there. And I'm anticipating you guys are going to have to use that differential as much as possible. And don't make Dave lose any more hair, but you know.
That was bad.
But it's all about the communities. And I think that if we get close to that differential, but we're keeping our communities whole, I think that will be totally defensible in a court. I really do. That's the #1 criteria. And we heard that very loud from everyone that spoke.
I will second that motion.
I know that's long, but there's a lot going on here. She could listen to the recording.
I got it.
I was texting with Kim, you guys, at like 9 last night. We had a long day, so poor thing.
Before we vote on this thing, I want a clarification. So you're saying that in El Dorado Hills, you will take that boundary on map 2, and where the southern part of it is move some of that in District 2, correct? All right. And then you're going to take and move the divide up, which could actually be, I think, would it be Bucks Bar Road, I think. No, Sly Park Road, which will move that up to Sly Park Road. Is that what you're tweaking District 2 a little bit?
Is that what needs to happen to keep Pleasant Valley together? Move it there?
Yes, it's gonna have to.
Okay,
The Somerset in Pleasant Valley, because it won't be.
okay.
You understand what I mean?
No, but staff will. They're gonna have to play with some numbers and move some boundaries and stuff and do the best they can with keeping the communities whole. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, well, that. I could see that as long as we do that with El Dorado Hills and then tweak that up, and that could be Sly Park Road as it runs across that.
That might work.
I work.
Okay.
And just to clarify the process, you're going to have, I think it's contemplated based upon the motion that you're going to have an opportunity to review this before giving that final direction to staff to come back with, at that point, the formal ordinance and all the, all the publication that goes with that for adoption. So Supervisor Turnbull, I just wanted to give you that reassurance that I think that what's contemplated is there will be another hearing at which you'll have the opportunity to see before finally voting on that map for adoption.
And is it okay to ask for several maps to see different variations? I'm thinking you're gonna have to do that just to play with numbers,
I would think
correct?
we should have 3 more variations of maps, not just one.
At least.
Yeah.
Well, I think we need to leave that up to staff.
Yeah.
I think
There's- But there's a lot of.
For them to
areas
determine
where-
where they think they can make those adjustments according to the direction we've provided. So I do want to offer a second motion. And the second motion is that in addition to motion 1 that Supervisor Parlin presented, that we also include derivations from the El Dorado Hills community draft that would accommodate the same kinds of inputs that you've heard, trying to maintain communities together as much as possible, trying to protect the Diamond Springs El Dorado Association as much as possible. The things that we've heard here, that we task staff to go ahead and include taking and tweaking the El Dorado's community draft to better accommodate the comments that have been made by the other supervisors that aren't either in District 1 or District 2 to meet their objectives. So I'm not sure how to clarify it more than that. There's been a lot of discussion. I can't repeat all of it, but it's recorded. So I would hope that we would be able to get to that. So
yeah,
that's my second motion.
Okay, and I'll second that.
Okay, so we have
2 motions.
any further discussion? All right. So we have,
Sue's the odd child out.
so we'll take, the
Okay,
second-
sorry.
So we'll take the second motion.
I know, right?
So we'll take the second motion first. All those in favor of the second motion, say aye.
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 No.
Opposed?
No,
Okay, that motion passed, I think 3-2, right?
Yes.
So we have direction now to staff to,
I'm sorry, but I'm just looking at Supervisor Novosel's face, and I'm not sure she understood the motion based
Right,
on
it's
that
just taking
expression.
consideration, correct?
Right,
yeah, it's just
Adding another-
consideration.
come
That's
back
all.
with some additional
Okay,
derivatives of
yeah.
the map.
Right,
Right.
that's all it
Got
is.
it. No, thank you.
And you supported that vote, right? Maybe we should have done roll call. Okay,
So I guess we better make a clarification on the motion then. Is that excluding or including the first motion?
the
Because it
motion
needs-
included the first motion, all,
Okay.
so
Okay.
basically saying, take both maps.
So wouldn't it be better just to amend the first motion, John, then, if you want to do that? I would be happy to amend it.
We just
so it's
passed
all
the
in
second
one
motion,
thing.
it's voted, so
Okay.
I think we've got the
Okay.
inputs. If staff is clear, that's the
Yeah,
main thing.
it's
Yeah.
maps.
Staff understands what we're asking of
Okay.
them. Take
okay, so you're
both
taking
maps,
both.
tweak them a little bit, consistent with the comments, and see what you can come up with. And then on November 16th, it sounds like, I don't know if that should have been part of the motion, but it doesn't have to be,
That's
right?
a given.
Okay, so,
It has
so
to
that
go.
motion was not at the exclusion of tweaking.
No.
No, it says
Okay.
in addition
It was
to.
I
taken
just
both
needed to
of-
understand.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just needed to
I
understand.
said, in addition to
Absolutely.
motion 1, with all the comments it made, also
Okay.
take
Okay,
the other map.
I misunderstood.
I do too. I don't think it was
Yeah.
very clear. And so that's why I
It's
asked.
clear to me.
Well, that's because you
Maybe I
guys are
should have
sitting
asked
next to
him to
each
read it
other.
back. I'm sorry.
That's
Isn't that what I said?
Yeah.
All right.
I think we're all tired from yesterday and other things.
Yes,
So,
we
and
are.
this is kind of a stressful situation, obviously, but, so I think staff has direction. Is there anything else we need to do before we adjourn today? Have we been able to conclude everything, recognize that we're anticipating a notice of a November 16th meeting? Is that the date to get on our calendars?
Mhm.
And would that be a morning session, an afternoon
It's
session?
a regular board meeting, so we would figure out the time during the agenda review process.
Okay. All right, got it. So let's come up under agenda review. So, all right, very
And
good.
I'll just note really quickly for the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I think I'm right. For that, we would select a time and rather, unlike our regular time allocations where it's anytime after that point, this hearing would need to start right on time.
Okay.
Jennifer's right. You can conclude an item that you may have pending at the time that you specified for the redistricting hearing, but she's right. It's not like we could set it for 10 a.m. and hear it any time thereafter. You need to start as close as possible to the specified time.
It'll probably be an afternoon timeframe is my guess, based upon the way we typically take items that will take major discussion to do in the afternoons, but
I would think so, but.
well, we'll work that in agenda review.
Yep. So for the public's benefit, once we have that time on the agenda, that's the time that the redistricting item will be heard.
Right. So mark the date on your calendar, November 16th. We're not sure of the timing yet, but we will announce that as soon as we determine it. And I want to thank everybody who made comments to this process. This is what it should be, but we needed about 3 more sessions like this to get all the community input.
It's too bad we didn't have.
We just didn't have the timeline to do it. So, but that's not driven by our determination. It was driven by when the state delivered to us the numbers based upon the federal census. And COVID was a big factor in all of that.
It
So
was the factor. That's what happened.
And I appreciate all of our staff's work.
99%, or I think there were some other things in there, but yeah, you're right. Right.
Our
So, all right.
staff is a lot of work on all of this, and thank you so much
Yes.
for.
Thank you for all the effort. And we've concluded early. I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 11:26. Okay. Again, thank you.